Hey guys, welcome back to another spooky video. So I thought it could be a really fun time to try and make a dragon costume. So this was a lot easier said than done. So I just started with a quick sketch and I was like, yeah, I want to incorporate the wings and let's add a tail and maybe like a corset design to mimic the scales, like the armor kind of look that dragons tend to have. And maybe we can make it a little sultry. And then I just didn't know. So I was like, well, dragons tend to be green, so let's color it green. Okay, but what fabrics do I have? So I do have some green fabrics, but when I was looking at my stash, I thought these screamed a little bit more dragon. And then I kind of forgot that I'd gotten like a scaly, snake skin-y looking fabric. So I thought I could incorporate that and we could go a red route and keep the original design, but I don't like it. Okay, what if we change it up? What if we make a yellow? I've got like a yellow design. So, ooh, this is looking pretty good, but it's not there yet. I think let's make it different. Let's make the wings more yellow and put like the cups from the original design back in there, and let's add that tail. Oh wait, I already added that. Anyway, the tail, now we're getting somewhere, and make the scales or like the spikes on the scale yellow. I am loving this design. So basically with the design in mind, it is time to get sewing. Okay, so when creating new designs, it's all fun and games until it comes to figuring out the pattern pieces. Now, I did know that for the corset, I figured I'd use the cups from the bralette and then add the corset from the fitted cups corset. So kind of doing like a mix and match, generally what I tend to do anyway for the corset. But for the tail, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Initially, I wanted it to continue downwards, so in one continuous, but I have decided to add it separately to be like a belt to go around. So this is a pattern piece that I came up with. It is really nice and long, and it's really nice and wide. Basically, the idea is to have one full piece like this, and then two pieces that are half this. And the half bit is actually going to be the top, because I made this as well. These are gonna be the spines. Basically, they're just gonna go right in there, just like that. So they get sewn in there, and that's of course till the very end. So that's the kind idea for the tail. As for the skirts, I am thinking of a full circle skirt with a quarter circle skirt extra for the center panel. Let's talk fabrics for a moment. So the whole design was actually based off this fabric that I got a while ago. It's a beautiful faux, kind of like a snake print, but it reminded me of a dragon skin. It is a little bit thicker. It is technically it's got a little bit of stretch, but it's a non-stretch mostly. But it's just got this beautiful texture on there that really reminded me of the dragon scale. So that's why I have this fabric. And with the fabric, I actually have these two bags. Mostly I want to use just one, but it's an option, at least if I need another bag. So I got these for free at a convention. They're just plain simple bags. I will not show you the other side, it doesn't matter anyway. And I thought that these two fabrics worked really well together, just like that. So the underbelly idea will be in this fabric, with the rest in this one. As for the wings, I will also be using this bag. So I think we have discussed the main bits. Let's just see if we can get to it. Let's start with something. I'm not sure yet. Maybe the corset, maybe the tail. Who knows? Maybe I'll start with the skirt. Doubt it, but it's an option. We'll see. Let's start with figuring out the fabric that we have to work with. So I'm just gonna start by going along the edge and unpicking this. The bottom is folded so that gives us a long piece. And then of course going ahead and picking the other bit. Okay, this is unfortunate. It's a good thing I have 2 bags. I will still continue with this. Okay, so our logo kind of goes here, slightly there, so I'd be able to work around this, especially with the corsets. I can use the top pieces. As for the skirt, if I am lucky, I can take the quarter circle skirt right from there. But I'm not sure, I don't think the length will work because of this rip. I do kind of feel like I need a bit more. So that's where the second bag will come in handy. I think for now I'll just make my spikes from the edges here, give this a little bit of a clean up, and then just kind of basically draw on my spikes. So these are our little dragon scales at the moment, and the idea is, that's why I left it open at the bottom. The idea is that me, that I stitch right along there and then cut it out afterwards to get it shorter and then flip it inside out. Now, I do have a little bit of the blue here, which I was really hoping wouldn't show up, that I would get it higher, but it seems that luck is not in my favor, and it would seem that we will end up with a little bit of blue. So I'm gonna see if there's a way to remove that from the bag, because if so, then I can just keep it, otherwise I'm just gonna be really annoyed, and I'm gonna have to figure something else out, or just ignore it and make it a cool detailing. I'm not sure yet. After all, I'm working with not just normal fabric, I'm working with a old bag. So now that we have this, the idea is just to cut along the edges so that we can cut the seam allowance as big or narrow as you want. Do keep in mind that we want to turn it inside out, so don't keep it too wide. So just kind of going in there until we can get all the little triangle pieces out. Now do keep in mind that you don't cut them too close to your stitches, especially if your fabric frays or tends to be like a cotton kind of fabric, since it's really easy when you turn it inside out to pull it from the stitches. I had a few of those problems, so I had to go back and sew it. I also recommend using some fray check if you've got some, just to seal those edges and to make sure it doesn't fray at all when you get to this turning point. Now, turning it inside out, I'm just using a little pointy tool that I have laying around. Sometimes I use the scissors, just whatever I have. Now, as you can see, I was going in there just to clip into that corner there. That is important for the nice little turns. Just keep in mind, don't cut the stitches. I did that on 2 of them, if I'm gonna be honest. Yeah, I had to fix that later. Don't worry, I did. I'm gonna give it a really good press since a lot of these are curling up a bit, and then we'll go from there. and all ironed out. As you can see, I do have a few black threads that I went back to sew, so I'm just gonna cut those out. And I am debating whether I want to add like a top stitching or not, mostly to hide these little ugly bits, but I'm not sure yet. I think I will add just a dot of glue on the tips there from the ones that are fraying, like this one here and on the side here, just to keep it safe. But I'm not sure yet what I want to do, adding details or not. Here's another black piece that I need to cut off. As for this, I still don't know what to do with that. Detail perhaps? Who knows? Figure that one out later. But that is the other side, which is looking pretty good. Now, remember that pattern that I showed you for making the tail? Yeah, that one. I'm going to be using that right now and pinning that in place. Now, I do want to have this symmetrical, so I'm actually folding it in half, even though I did already cut the pattern symmetrical, so it doesn't matter what I'm doing here. I wanted to choose how I laid the fabric down mostly, so that was my excuse for doing it this way rather than just doing it 2 layers at once. Okay, but I did have another second excuse for doing it that way, and that was mostly because I need to cut one of these pieces in half so that I have 2 pieces. Now, initially I thought about adding some seam allowance, and I couldn't be bothered, so I'm actually pinning this a little bit further from the edge, as you can see, so that I have this sewing seam allowance for adding the scales. So just keeping that one in mind. And then I'm just going to be folding that in half and then cutting it down the center so that I don't accidentally cut off my seam allowance, because that's what I tend to do, accidentally of course. So we're going to be sewing the front pieces of the tail first. So these are the 2 front pieces. I added a bit more on for the seam allowance. As for our little spikes, these small pieces here at the end are our end piece, and the big pieces are the big. Now, I do want my scales going downwards, so that's why I've got it like this going down. Now, I'm going to be lining this bit up all the way to the bottom. Now, I do have some space left over here, and that's because I do want to just sew that right into the end there. So just gotta place it the right way that I need it to be. And I do have some more extra seam allowance in here. I am keeping in mind that, so I've got this little pocket here. I've got my little pins in here, or not pins, my clips. And that's mainly because this fabric is, I don't know what you call it, but it's got that plasticky layer, and I don't really, I think, yeah, you can see the pinholes through there. So I'm just trying to be as careful with the pinholes as possible. That is why I've been putting the pins all the way at the edges. Now, to sew this, I'm actually going to put like a basting stitch right along this edge, trim off the extra bit that I've let off the edge there, since I didn't really keep in mind the amount of distance that I want between these spikes, since I just cut the edges there. And then I will line this up and do the complete seam allowance. So I did aim to have like a centimeter seam allowance on there. I didn't measure it out, you of course can. Anyway, I'm just going to do a quick basting stitch down the front. Now I would normally baste it from this side, but since I do need to make sure I catch it, I'm just going to go from the wrong way side. Okay, and don't ask me how, but why does it never line up? Alright, so with the spines attached, this is what we are currently looking like. I am pretty happy with it, and I am very happy it looks like a dragon's tail. At least it does to me. Anyway, we're going to be lining up this front piece with the back piece and just gonna pin or clip that all the way down and sew it. Now this video is getting already really long and I've only just covered the tail, so I'm just gonna go through this a little bit faster as it's a bit easier. The idea is to sew down the sides and then we're going to be stuffing into the center. So just enough stuffing to keep it shaped, but not too much that it actually becomes bulky. So keep that in mind. Let's just skip through the sewing and do all the rest. Now with the sewing done, I do want to clip into all those sides, and sorry I am off center in the camera there, and that is mostly just to relieve the tension in the fabric when I turn it inside out. Now, talking about turning it inside out, this was actually a little bit more of a struggle than I anticipated, mostly because I'm trying to be careful of the fabric while also trying to push it out, so that's a great combination. But hey, we got there in the end. It just takes a little while. And yes, I use some knitting needle, crochet hook kind of things to help. Use whatever you've got to help you turn it inside out. Now, it is time for the stuffing. Do this a little bit at a time and just make sure it is stuffed exactly where you want it. So I wanted to focus the stuffing more on the tip there, and I just used my knitting needle, actually it's a crochet hook, but it doesn't matter, to push it further down. This was probably one of the hardest, most time-consuming parts, but you'll get there. And now I'm just gonna sew this closed before adding something like a belt to it, because that's how I want to close it. Okay, so this is what it's currently looking like. Now we just need to find a way to attach it to her waist. There's technically 3 options. First option is attaching it to the corset, but I don't like that look. The second option is attaching it to the skirt, which is a possible option. And the third option is adding a bias binding like this one here. This is a really narrow bias binding, which just folds in half right over the top of this edge, and then adding it like a belt. So I've got these cute little clips which I'm planning on using for other projects, but they fit. This one fits perfectly through there, like that. Okay, so let's just make that belt. I am going to just put like a little end on one side. I did not measure, just eyeballed it how much I wanted to leave, and just leave enough that I can do an overlap. So I pinned that in place, have enough on both sides, and then I'm just sewing it closed. Just really nice and easy, straightforward stitch. Just keep in mind it's a bit more difficult to sew the tail now that it is stuffed, but it is fine. And then at the very end, we're just going to add our belt buckle. Okay, let's talk wings for a moment, because I don't feel like doing the dress right now, so I want to skip to the fun part. I'm I made a fun little drawing, and this is the design that I came up with. Awesome, right? And just holding it up to Izzy, I think the wing size is perfect. Now if you are using my pattern, feel free to make this bigger or smaller if you wish. I just think this is the perfect size that I was going for personally. The plan. Well, let's talk about the plan for a second. The plan is to have our base fabric for the wing, this one here. I'm gonna give this one a bit of an iron so it's nice and flat. We are going to draw our outline on there. And then we are going to use some hot glue, some toothpicks, and paint to create our bones. Well, they are technically bones, but since I'm making them black, I'm not sure if they're black bones or just kind of like veins. And then sewing by hand, doing all the little vein details by hand. And just winging that as I feel like it. So yeah. Now, I did invest a while ago for my diamond art into a light box, which I think is really gonna help me with drawing this out. So I just put it like this for a moment. Here you can see the different lights. And I'm putting this over top. It's kind of hard to see, but I can see it. And that just makes it so much easier. So I'm just going to be tracing this using my light board after giving this an iron. So let's just get to it. Now, honestly, there wasn't much to the whole tracing process. It was literally just that, tracing it. The only thing that I do recommend is to keep in mind that whatever you trace, that unless you're gonna paint it, be aware that you're gonna see it. So I wasn't too worried about the bone marks since I was gonna be painting them, but on some of the other parts, I could have been a little bit neater. Just saying. Okay, so this part, while it was a little bit tedious, I actually really enjoyed it. It was really fun just being able to play around and covering it with hot glue. The idea of the toothpicks is to give it strength and structure and a bit of a 3D effect. It doesn't have to be too perfect since, well, at least I covered it in hot glue, so just kind of keep that as an option, that you don't have to keep it as neat as you might think. The only thing is that do keep it within the lines, because otherwise you're just gonna make it bigger and bulkier. So just keeping that as a side note. Yeah, it's definitely fun to just go at it and do it. Just as a side note, I do have some parchment paper or baking paper underneath my fabric, and that's just to prevent hot glue from sticking to my working table, since it's just so much easier to pull it off the baking paper. So just a little tip for you. Now the next step could have also been done first, it's up to you. Anyway, my next step is to cover the wings, especially the ends here, in fabric glue. It's just normal white glue, actually, doesn't matter. I'm using normal white glue here. I don't have fabric glue with me, so yeah. Anyway, the idea is that I'm just going to be cutting out the wings, so I'm not going to put any hem on here. I don't want them to fray. That's the idea, so it's like a fray check, and I'm just doing that with some regular white glue. And with the glue dried, this is what they are currently looking like. And I was actually pretty impressed with myself. I wasn't expecting them to be this cool looking at this point, so a little pat on the back for myself. I'm allowed to do that, right? Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to be painting first and then cutting out. So paint first, then cut. Sounds like a good idea, right? By the way, paint also gives it a little bit of a reinforcement, so if you want them stiffer, it's great. If you don't want it stiffer, you might want to look into having already the right fabric or fabric dye, I don't know. I wanted them stiffer since I want them to stand up. So yeah, let's just get to the painting part. That's always fun. So for the painting, I'm working in a lot of layers. I started out with the darkest undertone. For me, that was black on the bones, or you know what I mentioned before. And then I'm going in with a dry brush, or trying to dry brush at least, on top of that with a brown, and then with some gold, and later on some white as well, just to give it that really textured look. And you can of course add some more paint to the wings themselves as well, so that always gives it a really cool look as well. But I just tried to mainly focus on the bone details since I was pretty happy with the fabric. So this is what they are looking like at the moment. Now it's time to just simply cut them out. And with that, the wings are actually done. The only thing you still need to do is add a little wire armature. I basically did like a U shape for the armature so that I could put it into the corset. You can also do little straps that go around the shoulders, but since I had a strapless design, I decided to go with this shape so that I could easily put it into the corset and just tighten it to go along with it. Alright, and it's already time to continue with the corset because that is what is up next for this project. I'm really doing things out of the usual order. I mean, you would normally finish with the tail and the wings, but hey! Gotta love working out of order because that's how I tend to do things anyway. It is better to do first what you feel like making at that time than doing it and then later regretting doing it because you didn't feel like it. So, do it all at your own pace. Yeah. Anyway, these are the pattern pieces that I'm working with. For the center front, I'm back to the original calico kind of fabric, and then the rest is the snake skin. Or, dragon skin, I mean. Anyway, the idea was, and I ended up going with, to use the two cups from the bralette and then the corset from the fitted cupped corset. Both of those patterns are already on my Ko-fi. You can check out if you are interested. Now, I do want to know that I found out that these two patterns do not work exactly together. So I did end up modifying slightly after I'd sewn it all together. So just a little extra pleat in there, or dart. It is fine. It is completely fine. Anyway, I was getting excited and started sewing the center front of the corset together, but as you can see, I got to have the fun of unpicking that. The idea was actually to add some texture to that front panel, which I'd forgotten, so I unpicked it and added the detailing. Basically, the detailing is just some sewing design in the V shape. And from there on, I just sewed all the other corset pieces together like I did for the corsets. That other video. Basically, just the center front to the side fronts to the side backs to the back, etc. Until you get all the way around, and then you add in the cups, and you reinforce the back, and you do all of that. Just a very quick version of the already existing video. This one is already getting long enough, but I still wanted to mention it. Now, just a little side note, since I am combining two patterns here, the cup pieces do not actually match up. So I did some hand sewing to gather the bottom together before hand stitching them to the bodice to try and keep them in the right place. So yeah. And this is what my bodice is currently looking like, and I'm very, very satisfied with that center panel, and it really finished it off. Now, this black bias binding, that is the one that we use for the belt. Yes, exactly. We are going to be using this all the way around. Now, This cup is still pointed at this time, and I was debating on smoothing that out since I wanted a strapless design, but I ended up going with a around the neck strap design. So I'm just going to place all of these black pieces around until it is perfect, basically. I'm just doing it. Now, to create a little bit more of a point in here, I am just pinching it right in the center there, clipping that, and then sewing it. I was really about to say cut it, but no, sew it. You're gonna sew it in place. Just like a little triangle that we do for the t-shirt, just like that. And now we continue with the bias binding along the remaining edges. So the sides and the back. Don't forget the center back. And then at the end we will do the little loop that goes around her neck. And this is the corset so far. I am truly amazed how much that black bias binding around the edges did. It finished it off so nicely. Plus it gave it a lot of structure, and that is always helpful. Anyway, around this bit I decided to do a strap that goes around the neck. As wasn't in the original design like I mentioned before, but basically I sewed it with the right sides together so that I could flip it up, and then I did a little tiny top stitch just to make sure that the seam allowance stayed in place. Now, to finish the corset, I wanted to do a lace up back, which meant I was going to add some eyelet holes. Now, I could do this by hand or use the metal ones, but I wanted to keep this like a rustic dragon, kind of like a homemade feel, you know, like the rough dragon type. So I wanted to use the embroidery function that my machine has to make little eyelet holes, just like this. So I'm using a piece of the scrap fabric just to test how it goes and which way around I need to worry about going. I didn't mark out where my eyelets were gonna go. I probably should have. They ended up slightly wonky, but it is fine. At this point, I didn't care. Is that bad? Probably. But it turned out fine, so winging it sometimes works. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. And this is what the final corset looks like. I just used a little stabby thingy, I think scissors, and just to push those little holes through. I use some very sharp scissors. Just be careful that you don't cut through the stitches, but I'm sure I don't need to remind you. Anyway, the only thing that's left to do now is to close it up, and to close up the back, I'm going to lace it. And I thought of using some embroidery thread. The only thing is that it is not very strong, especially the ends. So I'm just reinforcing the ends there with a bit of glue just to stiffen them up to make it easier to work with. Trust me, it is so much easier to work with. Threading it, tying it, everything. So I do recommend just gluing those ends just like that. Okay, so we have wings, we have a tail, we have a corset. I think the only thing that we have to do now is a skirt. Well, I do have something in mind for some finishing touches, but anyway, I need to make a skirt. So I have cut up one more bag, it is just one side this time, and I figured I could use this to make the center front of the skirt. So here I've got Izzy, our lovely model right now, and as you can see, the skirt is at the right length. Or, you know, basically the right length. I do want to use this. I'm gonna cut it right here and then take off whatever the hem is, but I'm just gonna ignore that for now, since I do want the full length, so I have a little bit of hemming allowance. Now, pattern-wise, I don't have a pattern. I don't feel like drafting one. I figured I could just wing it. The idea is I just need to have something that goes nice and full, so I can get a nice full skirt. So basically that's it. I need a center front panel, like the corset. I need 2 side front panels, 2 side back panels, and a back panel. And basically that. For this fabric, I just need the center front panel. Now I do have my little corset pattern piece here. I'm going to be using the bottom to line it up. Basically, I'm gonna make a mark here and fold that over and have the other mark here. So I have exactly the center front width to go with the corset right here. So I've got the same width so it can flow over if we just ignore the fact that this is black, but I do want the fact that this starts out the same width before paneling out. At least that's my idea behind it. And then the rest of the skirt will just be, you know, the rest of the skirt. So yeah, I'm just gonna do some random drafting, figure out how it's gonna flow, and we'll see how it ends up. Alrighty, so I ended up cutting 8 pattern pieces. They are exactly the same, all the same width. So this is going to be the center, front, and then we have all the other pieces that will line up beside that. So yeah, basically all I'm good to do now is sew them together, and that's the main of the skirt. Let's get to it. Okay, just had a quick fit test and 8 pieces is enough, so number 9. So generally at this point I would do a hem. The only problem is that I don't like the fold over look on this particular skirt. I don't like the whole hem look. So while I was trying to figure it out, I kind of realized that I should have rounded it off, and I'm not gonna round it off now, but that's not the point. My fabric doesn't fray, that skin one, it doesn't fray, so I can just leave it rough. The only one is the center one, but even that, I'm not gonna be touching it that much, so no hem it is. I always love it when I get to skip out on a hem. Now to finish off the top of the skirt, I'm actually doing a similar design as I was doing for the tail. The only thing is that this is going to get a snap button instead of a whole belt buckle. Now to complete the costume, we need a mask. Yes, we do. So I created a pattern online from having a look at some existing things, And I'm going to be making it using some craft foam as well as using some of the other fabrics. So I'm just starting out with cutting out all the pattern pieces separately so that I do not waste any of my craft foam. Now the craft foam I chose is white. I wanted to keep it as close to like the natural color of it, but I did debate on using a black. I just didn't have enough black, so hence the white. Now, just a little note, take your time with cutting them out as you will be tracing around them. So if you're sloppy, you'll see that later on with the tracing. So this is just a little hint in there. Plus, hey, now you can keep the pattern and use it again and again to make as many dragon masks as you want. I don't really know why you would make more than one, but hey, maybe you're making a whole dragon army. You never know. Now with all your pattern paper pieces cut out, it is time to trace all around it. Now I am using the pen just to mark all the little dots, so just pushing straight down into the foam and then going back in there with the pen just to mark them so I don't lose them. This is actually where we're going to be sewing them, so do mark those little holes basically. And I'm just going around, just trying to line them up as close as possible together. And I don't really know what order, it doesn't matter anyway. Basically, the idea is for me to cut these out and then glue fabric onto them. But because the fabric does need some drying time, I don't want to cut them out and then cut them out again. So I'm just doing a rough cut, separating the center front so that I can glue that separately, and then all the other pieces will get the other glue. Now I did have a bit of trouble actually. This glue wasn't sticking as well to the fabric as I hoped it would. I mean, it stuck, but there were points where it was coming undone. Ooh, look at the donuts coming in there. I was having a great snack break. Anyway, just gluing. I'm just using regular white school glue as I don't really care if it hardens as it's all over anyway. So yeah. Otherwise you can use some fabric glue, of course. It is up to you. And after it's all glued down, it is time to cut all the pieces out again. Just like you did with the pattern piece, it is time to fully cut it out. I did put a little bit of weight on some of the pieces just to make sure they stayed nice and flat while the remainder of the glue was drying, as I realized that there were some parts that were not completely dry yet. But this is what it's looking like so far, and I am pretty impressed with myself. And this is what we are with. So now it's actually time to sew it together, and I've chosen to hand sew this as it's only a little bit and it just needs a nice cleaner look. I'm using some regular sewing thread to do it, and I'm just going to be starting with the nose. So for this whole process I did take my time to make sure that I got it lined up as nicely as possible. I did have a bit of a problem where my fabric was releasing slightly at the nose, as you saw that I was struggling to go through it, and that was most because I just tried to keep the fabric lined up. But the idea is to line the side pieces of the face, as you saw me line up before, just with it underneath the center of the nose. So the little gap on the side is going to be the eye hole, and then on the bottom it gets lined up. So I'm just sewing one side of the nose and side pieces together and then attaching the other nose piece, or you know what I'm saying, right? So basically you should end up with a T shape that when you fold it up, it should form the face. Now to sew the rest of the face, I did decide just to do one first and finish it completely. So grabbing some new thread, I was doing a double layer just to make sure my thread is nice and strong. I'm just gonna go in there and sew it together. Now, I can make a much more detailed video of this if you want, but for now, it's actually a pretty straightforward pattern once you realize how it looks. So it's just the side piece that should lock together, as you can see. So I don't really think you need it much more detailed. Plus this video is already long enough as it is. I just really want to add it in here to show you the whole process. Now that final piece that's still laying on the table is actually not going to be included in the pattern, and this was supposed to be for the bottom of the nose, just to keep its shape, but I actually really liked how it looked without it, so I decided to leave it out, and it's also not in the actual pattern. Also, the pattern for this mask will be on my Ko-fi account, so you can check that out in the description below. And you can probably find some of the other pieces, such as the tail and the wings, in my Ko-fi shop as well. So go and check it out. Okay, so this is what the mask is looking like right now after all its sewing. And just to finish it off, it is time to add the elastic so that she can actually wear it. Now, the idea for sewing the elastic in there is actually just to tie a little double knot on one side, sewing that in place, just going straight through to the other side. And unfortunately, you will see the stitches. So I just decided to try and keep it as neat as possible by taking just 2 spots and going around the 2 spots. So creating a little loop situation, pulling it nice and tight in between. And then don't forget to measure it around your doll. The last thing you want to do is it having to do it again. So do measure it and then cut it and do it all over again on the other side. Great time, great time. Anyway, with the mask done, that's basically the end. It is time for the final review. So now remember, this was the original design, and now it's time to see what it actually came out to be. I absolutely had so much fun with this whole project. Everything came together so nicely. I love how the wings ended up looking. The mask is making it so majestic, and just the fullness of the skirt is exactly what I was looking for. Plus that tail, that's the final finishing touch that I absolutely adore. Now, I did have some fun with these photos, trying to put her in a few different poses, and I think I did pretty well. Can I just compliment myself on that? So yeah, but basically the back of the wings are not very nice. They don't need to be very nice, since you generally don't see them. So please, no judgment on the back of my wings. And that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I had so much fun making it, and I wish you a happy Halloween! Bye bye! See you all next time! Bye!